Welcome to Book Lovers Corner, our first broadcast for 2020. We're being broadcast by Wairarapa Community Access radio station, Arrow FM 92.7, every fourth Tuesday of the month, 3:30 to 4:30, throughout the year. This is one of 12 community access radio stations in New Zealand, and we are sponsored by Elmo's Books, our wonderful independent bookshop in Carterton. You can listen to our program live by connecting in with Arrow FM, or listen later via podcast, which you can download onto your device. You can also be watched live on Wairarapa TV, Freeview, Channel 41, and on YouTube. We'd appreciate any feedback that you can offer by contacting the station's Facebook page. I'm Valda Kirkwood, and the other members of the team today are Sue Lawrence and Gareth Rapson. Welcome, Sue, and welcome, Gareth.
Good afternoon.
And we're going to start off today with a look at the best books of 2019 in the opinion of The Guardian, The Listener and The Economist. And Gareth is going to start us with that.
Book lists, of what was really hot, or what was kind of noted are quite prevalent, but just three of these magazines. First one was The Economist with a freezing Boris on it. The Economist said it's free. I mean, The Economist their books are politics and current affairs and history and biography and memoir and economics and culture and ideas, but they do pick up a little bit on fiction too. But the first one was Underland, that A Deep Time Journey by Robert Macfarlane. Now this was reviewed,
which I loved,
which was well reviewed by Velda, and it was a look below the surface, and you look at the planet from ground down, and The Economist loved it. Then they had Ducks Newbury Port by Lucy Ellman. Now this is a 1,000-page book. I couldn't bring it to show you because it's so heavy and I couldn't lift it. It's basically a monologue, mostly in one single sentence. I tried it. I went for about 80 pages, which the librarian said was a terrific, great challenge, a great effort. But it faded and very challenging. Though I understand there are people that love it, and it did get in the Economist list. And the other one was, the last one from the Economist was a book, Black Sun, which I saw at Elmo's today, which is by Owen Matthews, and it's a thriller in a secret Soviet city based on a true story where a KGB agent is sent to check out this. They're trying to build the one bomb that'll end all bombs so that they can sort of hold that over the world, and they want to test it, which is a bit of a problem. And it's a good story, good rattling, good read. The Guardian. Now, The Guardian Weekly, which is just a really popular weekly collation of of the best. And they looked at, they mentioned in their best list, they had Bernardine Evaristio's Girl, Woman, Other, which I'll review later in the year. As we get to it, that was the co-winner of the Booker. They mentioned Deborah Levy's The Man Who Saw Everything. I've just finished that. That was challenging. We'll talk about that also later in the year. Olive Again, Elizabeth Strout. Is that the author of the...
Elizabeth Strout, yeah.
Olive
Kitteridge, yeah.
Yeah, that got a mention. And in celebrity books, the Guardian said Debbie Harry's Face It. Is that in Elmo's?
Not seen it.
Not some, but I'm sure Me by Elton.
Definitely, all sold out.
All sold out, yeah.
Yep.
And that apparently is a great celebrity read. Nothing really caught my eye in the graphic novels or memoir or sport, but the Guardian said Underland. Beautiful. And
yes!
they said it's fabulous. So,
golly.
There's The Guardian. I think Velda, like 2 out of 2 so far. The Listener, our very own Christmas edition, much loved edition, and I think book lovers do look forward to this. Yep. They're kind of all their reviewers pitching in and saying this is our favourites. We had Akin by Emma Donoghue, which Sue reviewed for us. We had Ducks Newbury Port by Lucy again. I don't know why that was on the list, but it somehow made it. The Machines Like Me, Ian McEwan, which Sue introduced.
Yes,
You, in fact, you had an early edition of it, didn't you?
I did. I liked it. Not everyone's liked it. Let me just say that.
I thought it was great.
I did too.
That's the key to this show, actually, is that I hear about books from my buddies here, and then I end up reading them, and I like the way that the things they recommend. Anyway, Quixote, or Don Quixote, Salman Rushdie, once again reviewed by Sue, was one of the best reads, according to the listener. The Wall by John Lancaster, which is in our the South Wairarapa library system. I recommend that one too for those who'd like a dystopian Britain with a wall all the way around it as they keep everybody out.
Hasn't that been done in Roman times?
It's done in modern times.
Isn't it done psychologically now?
Trump's probably, if he read, which apparently is debatable, but he's taken inspiration perhaps. Crime and thrillers, nothing really sprung to mind. The life stories, the listener liked Me by Elton John again. Also, they commended The Two Popes, Anthony McCartan's, whether they were published as a book and then made it into the Netflix series, but that there's a lot of buzz about that on Netflix, saying terrific show.
And you've watched it, haven't you, Sue?
I was engrossed. Yeah, it's just wonderful.
Yep, and art and literature, the Colin McCann's big volume by Justin Patton, which I think is, I will be talking about that later in the year. Yep. And science, they thought Underland was
surprise.
So that really is the hot, sort of science pick. And also they mentioned another book reviewed by Velda, The Body by Bill Bryson. So, looking at our lists, at the lists on, of best books, the show here last year captured a good smattering of them.
Yeah, we picked well.
Yeah, no, we were on top of that.
And given that we really we usually choose books that we are drawn towards, I think that's really interesting.
Probably a good comment on Almos. I think, careful buying by a bookshop gets the best in front of us. There's a lot out there, so we do rely on people selecting for the audience, the Wairarapa readers, which I think they really understand, and
I think this also, the Wairarapa library system, at least the ones we're familiar with, do a really, really good job as well, because all the books I've read have been available at the library.
Yep.
And it's probably social media, the buzz gets to us, and magazines in New Zealand tend to have a strong book review section that anything that's putting their hand up saying read me tends to get noticed. And
I think the other thing is the radio programs, like Kim Hill, particularly of a Saturday morning, in-depth interviews of authors, which is how I got onto Underland, was because she interviewed him, and I was just, bowled over by the interview, which then got me into reading it.
You really have to, if you're in the book trade, you have to do a scan of what's coming up on the radio. Television doesn't feature, but what's on the radio is significantly influences people's buying.
Remember Emily Perkins?
Yeah, she did a book program.
I love that program.
So did I.
And I don't know why it never got the legs to be repeated. It's you have to just think of the Philistines who run our media, who attack concert programming and shows like the book show. I believe there's an audience for that. But anyway, Velda, you were going to talk to us about...
Yes, let's get on to today's agenda. And today I'm going to initially talk about the 2019 Pulitzer Prize winner for fiction, The Overstory. Oops. And Gareth will then talk about some crime busters, Masters of Crime Busters, Lee Child, about his latest book, Blue Moon, Michael Connolly's The Night Fire, and ponder on why they are such great summer reads for the beach or in the hammock. And after a music break, we will then come back to hear what Sue has to say about Stephen Fry's Mythos, the Greek myths retold. So that will take us through till we're time to summarise everything up again and bid you farewell for another month. And during the program today, we'll also hear of sad news that one of our number is going to disappear, and I will let her announce that herself when it's her turn.
Well, it will be a surprise now.
So Overstory, which I just loved. It's a book by Richard Powers, was winner of the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 2019. It's a very, very complex book, which makes it a very, very interesting read. As one reviewer said, it's part short stories. So what it does is models a tree. So you have the roots, then the trunk, then the crown, and from the crown you get the seeds for the next growth. And so the first bit, the roots, are told in short stories. And the short stories are absolutely engaging. It's what drew me into this book. You have a Norwegian family, the Holes, or Hurls, I'm not sure, Hoel, family who come out from Norway, end up going out into the middle of Ohio, I think, and take with them some chestnut tree seeds and plant them. And then over time, I presume something like the Dutch elm disease, but something that affected, a virus that affected the chestnuts, killed every chestnut in the United States, apart from this one of the umpteen trees that the Hurls grew from seed. And because it was such a precious tree for the family, the great-great-grandfather of Nicholas Hurl, who was part of the thread of this book, the great-great-grandfather used to take photographs on the 21st of every month for 3 decades. He took photos of this tree through all seasons. His son did the same, and his son did the same. So when it came to Nicholas Hurl, who when he ended up with all the family having died off because they were gassed in winter because the carbon monoxide killed the whole household of them, it was just a shocking story. He ended up with all these photographs of trees. And from that, he ended up became an artist with a passion for drawing trees. And it is a beautiful short story told absolutely engagingly. And so you end up with a whole lot of short stories of that sort of nature that connect him with trees.
That's a huge subject, though, for a short story, isn't it?
Well, it is. And all of them some of them have really big stories, but they are encapsulated beautifully. His writing is so compact in this part of the book. So you have this part short stories in the roots section, and then you have the trunk. These individuals, there are 9 lots of people, all start connecting up in different ways with their passion for trees. And it happens at a time in the United States when there is wholesale milling of trees, downing of trees, including enormous ancient trees which have whole ecosystems within them. And this is where the reviewer says part short stories, part tree porn, and which I thought was a very intriguing way to describe it. But the passion is there for the trees and how these people get together to try and protect the trees. Then you come to the crown, which is what happens as an outcome of all these people getting together to form this trunk to fight for the trees. What is the outcome of that? And lots of very diverse outcomes. You have within that, one of the people is Patricia Westerfold, who is a scientist working in the forest, and she actually takes on in theory the work that was done by Peter Wolleben. And I can't find, here we are, the Secret Network of Nature, which I've talked about, along with the Hidden Life of Trees. And that is encapsulated in her story. So and while it's a novel, it takes into account scientific research that's been going on, and it's incorporating that in. So part rant is another. So you've got part short stories, part tree porn, part rant. So a lot of the scientist views are coming through this and thread in the story. And then you get into the seeds, what the final outcomes. Now, it says part ramble. And it is. You had to work at the connections, work at what's the point of this particular thread in the story. And you only find that out really till you get to the seeds at the end. Mm-hmm. So it's a really fascinating read, and one that I heartily recommend, along with Underland, which I talked about last year, and the Secret Network of Nature and the Hidden Life of Trees, which I've talked about. They all interconnect. And we also have mentioned in there, just to make sure that we integrate, or we're not just talking about science or fiction, we've got in the overstory a poem by Philip Larkin, The Trees. The trees are coming into leaf, like something almost being said. The recent buds relax and spread. Their greenness is a kind of grief. Is it that they are born again, and we grow old? No, they die too. Their yearly trick of looking new is written down in rings of grain. Yet still the unresting castles thresh in full-grown thickness every May. Last year is dead, they seem to say. Begin afresh, afresh, afresh. Thank you. Gareth.
Can I ask you,
yes, yeah.
who is Richard Powers, and what else has he done?
Richard Powers has done a lot of these sort of books. He's an author of 12 novels, including Orfeo, which I've never heard of, Orfeo, which was in fact listed for the Man Booker Prize one year. The Echo Maker, Time of Our Singing, Galatea 2.2, The Ploughing of the Dark. And so he's been a 4-time NBCC nationalist. He lives in the foothills of the Great Smoky Mountains. So he's somebody who likes to weave in fact in with fiction to inform people in a way that might in fact perhaps change minds. Yeah. I think that's my
making science
accessible. And he's got some really good comments or reviews from Anne Patchett, who we all know, Barbara Kingsolver, whom we know, and so on. So it's really, really, I recommend it.
You do.
I do.
Will it find a general audience out there, or is it too complicated? The 9 sort of big stories interwoven strikes me as like a few too many,
Well, I have to say, I think that's where this review of part short stories, part tree porn, part rant, part ramble, it captures it a bit. And you do have to, I think you do have to do a bit of work. But
That's good.
But then you have, as opposed to that, you have the sort of authors that you're going to talk about. I mean,
well, you don't have to do so much work. In fact, the work will all be done for you. Just and this was summer crime blockbusters is really where we're looking at here of popular 3 popular writers and their works. First one, let's just pick one off the top. The latest by Lee Charles, Blue Moon, number 24 in the series. And you were saying?
I was saying that I believe is his last, because the brand will continue, but the author will be his brother.
It's intriguing,
there you
isn't
go.
it?
I had not heard that, and you heard it here first.
I heard it on Facebook.
Right. This is an urban Jack Reacher. He's comes into a nameless, suitably big-sized city, and it's going to be a turf war between the Albanians and Ukrainians, and he's going to be creating mayhem and sorting out social justice. And that's the story. I mean, this Jack has sold over 100 million copies and has made Lee Charles a very, very rich man. The news is that this year's Booker panel is going to have Lee Charles on it. So for once, we may actually get a more popular book that people will actually kind of read rather than a kind of high-end literary book.
And a decision about a winner.
We may get a winner, which that would be good. Lee Charles is now 65 years old. And by the way, actually, the Booker you get, it's worth £50,000, which I checked is 98,000 New Zealand dollars.
Not to be sneezed at.
No, but it does show you the state of our money. That it's 2 for 1. Keep in mind that last year's we had the Atwood's The Testaments and Bernardine Evaristo's Girl, Woman, Other. Both of them quite challenging books, and it'll be fun to see this year what Lee Charles gets to it. The judges apparently have to read about 175 novels if you're a Booker judge, but Lee Charles says he reads a book a day, a novel a day. He says that's not going to be a problem. Now, most of us, are we reading a novel a day?
No, but I can read a novel in a day, but not for 365 of them.
No.
And some of them, there's no way I could read Over Story in a day or Underland in a day.
You're going to have to read
But
fast.
Lee Charles I could read in a day.
Well, I find that quite positive, because he reviews a lot. A lot of the thrillers you'll see a comment from Lee Charles, and he likes everything he reads.
And a book like this, these are gulped down, on the beach and all that sort of thing. They're page-turning, designed to engage, and whether you're sitting on an aeroplane or something like that, the time flies. You are very keen to see how Jack goes. Now, Lee Charles's real name, of course, is Jim Grant, and he goes, his most enthusiastic readers are bloodthirsty old grannies who they judge the book on how many people that Jack kills. So he says, he has to keep in mind that these grannies want a high death count, and Blue Moon certainly delivers that.
They do.
Really?
Yes.
Yes.
They love their crime.
Right, and I guess it's kind of like I'll end this comment with about Lee Charles. He said, "Don't ever try and beat me in Trivial Pursuit." He says, "I've never lost, and I'll just murder you." So I always thought that was kind of like good old Lee.
But before you go on to the next one, did you were saying something that you heard about Lee Child and Jack Reacher being made into films?
Oh yeah, that's right. The Amazon media side of Jeff Bezos' mega empire have got the rights now to the Lee Charles movies, and they are apparently currently in production, probably 2 or 3 at once. So they will be finding their way either onto Amazon Prime, I guess, is how they'll be launched. And the fact that Bezos was in Wellington recently, we're supposedly meeting up with our movie people on the peninsula. Who knows what involvement that Weddell Works, Media Works, will be into with that. And of course, we all want to see who they're going to cast as Jack. Is going to be
a tall blonde person, I hope.
Or dark.
Yeah,
he's blonde, isn't he?
Somebody 6'6" and weighing
Chris
150k and sort of.
Or Liam Hemsworth.
I like Chris.
Moving on. Michael Connelly's latest, The Night Fire. Once again, this is the 32nd Harry Bosch book, and I think I've read him pretty well. I've been a follower for many years, and I reckon I could, though some of them blurred into it, they have been made into about 4 long TV series have been made of them. A couple of them are combined books, use the ideas from, they've had twin plot lines over a 10 episode series, and they've been pretty good. This is but Harry is retired now. He's no longer the alpha cop. He's got health issues, and though the book has got a very eventful little finale, the 3/4 of it, absolutely nothing happens. It's just police procedural. It's following leads, working it through, and you get caught up with police thinking
and connecting in with his mates that he has in the police force.
Right, and you do get into this. I mean, obviously he has some really good friends who are who know police work, and it just comes through so strongly. He's still very compelling. It's a cold case one, which his latest books tend to have been, and of course tucked in it is Detective Renee Ballard, who re-energized the series in 2017 when she started. I think The Night Shift might have been the first book. She's she does all the heavy lifting in the read. She's kind of young, smart, driven, damaged, and for some strange reason lives on a tent on Santa Monica Beach.
Yes, that's.
We'll pass that by. But well, we forgive a lot. It's California, it's Los Angeles. But it does have Mickey Heller. Now, I love the Mickey Heller series that were tucked away, who's related to Harry, and they've had a few cases been involved, but he's in it. So you've really got this trifecta of Bosch, Ballard, and Heller, 3 terrific characters, nicely weaving in, and the court case embedded in the book is terrific. It's once again, it's clear-eyed prose. It's you on the beach or in your hammock, you're going to find you just race through it. It's unnecessarily complex, I thought. There's a very hasty wrap at the end. That's not totally convincing, but it's this is what I would describe as mid-level Connolly. And mid-level Connolly is really better than pretty well any other crime writer you get. I mean, the guy is a master of this sort of genre. So commended. I think you'll enjoy him. And the last one, just quickly, was Robert Cray's latest book, A Dangerous Man. Typical Joe Pike, Elvis Cole is the detective again. I preferred the Cole books. This is a Joe Pike one. It seems a bit of a rip-off of the movie Taken, where a young woman is kidnapped, and Joe in this case is going to unravel the case. And good read. I like Cray. I think he's got a great handle on LA as just like Connolly, and really quick, funny, engaging read. And I think fans of Cole and Pike will enjoy that book.
So Taken, that's Liam Neeson, isn't it? Is it?
That was a Liam Neeson did the three.
I will
the three
find you and I will kill you.
That's right, and he gets that voice, the good luck, which is no, the first movie was excellent, and they kind of panned down from that.
I'm just thinking of names back to the Michael Connolly, I think, where you had Bosch, Ballard, and Heller. Now they are really strong names, aren't they? They are. Yep. You could put Eastern people called by those names.
You can actually get your name in these books. They often have charity speaking events, and if you auction for it, you can get your name as a character.
Yeah, but I'd probably be a criminal rather than a crime fighter.
I don't think Sue will be a criminal, but
I could try.
That's right. Yeah. But no. So summer reads. These are all they sell really well.
Oh yes, Lee Child. We get more and more each year, and we still have to order more. He's just a phenomenal.
Yeah.
What about Michael Connolly?
Yeah, he does well, but he's not in the Lee Child. He's
they say like
not on that scale.
One sold in the world every 3 or 4 seconds for like 30 years.
And you have also got Overstory. You have got some copies, couple of copies,
yes. 2 copies. Yes, we have copies in store. Quite right. And I think we've got Michael Connolly and Lee Child as well.
Right. We'll go now to our musical offering, which is Tracy Chapman, and it's talking about a revolution.
Don't you know, they're talking about a revolution. Whisper. Don't you know, they're talking about a revolution. It sounds like a whisper. While they're standing in the welfare lines, crying at the doorsteps of those armies of salvation, wasting time in the unemployment lines, sitting around waiting for a promotion. Don't you know, talking about a revolution. It sounds poor people gonna rise up, get their share. Poor people gonna rise up and take what's theirs. Don't you know you better run, 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 run. Oh, I said you better run, 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 run. 'Cause finally the tables are starting to turn, talking about a revolution. 'Cause finally the tables are starting to turn, talking about a revolution. Oh no, talking about a revolution. Oh, while they're standing in the welfare lines, crying at the doorsteps of those armies of salvation, wasting time in the unemployment lines, sitting around waiting for a promotion. Talking about a revolution, oh no. Talking about a revolution, oh no.
Welcome back to Book Lovers Corner. You're with Arrow FM 92.7, and we have discussed today Overstory by Richard Powers, and from Gareth we have looked at Michael Connolly and at Lee Child and Robert Cray.
Right.
So now we move on to Sue and Stephen Fry's Mythos.
Yes, but before I do that, I'm going to bid everyone a fond farewell, because this is my final contribution to Book Lovers Corner. Not because I don't love you all, but because I'm moving to Waiheke Island. Yeehaw.
And you're following the wine trail?
Well, I have a son in the wine business, so that won't be difficult.
And you will be sending us email notes saying, have we got this on the radar?
I'm going to keep in touch. I intend to keep in touch with what I'm reading.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
You can have a Sue's 2 minutes if you want.
Oh, that is an excellent idea. We
Sue
will.
from the north.
Yeah.
Yes.
Make me sound like a
Yeah.
Mountie.
Why Sue?
Yeah.
Why Sue in Wairarapa?
Yeah. God.
I can see it now.
Okay, that's it. Okay.
Right.
Well, anyway, back to the subject in hand, which is this book, Mythos. Yes? Stephen Fry. Not new. It came out in 2017, and I've watched it go in and out of the shop over the last couple of years and thought, I'm going to read that one day. And I happened to be passing through Auckland Airport with nothing to read, and I thought, now's the day. And I'm really glad that it was the day too, because I have thoroughly enjoyed this as a read and an explanation of the Greek myths. They are a passion of Stephen Fry's, and he writes engagingly about them. First thing to say is that myths, of course, are fiction. They're always in the fiction section. Some people think, that must be true. They're part of our history, so they should be non-fiction. But no, myths are fiction. And most civilizations have them as a way of explaining the natural world and how people interface with it and with each other. The difference with Greek mythology and why it's been so central to civilizations beyond Greece is that it was preserved in literature by the Greek poets. So they've come down through literature and have been a source of study for generations of schoolboys and others. So the great Greek poets like Homer and Sophocles and Aristophanes all wrote and all explained the Greek myths. And then Ovid brought them into the Roman literature, and it's through Ovid that Shakespeare, we get the mention of myths in Shakespeare, usually Roman rather than Greek. So, anyway, the Greeks created gods that, unlike the Egyptians, who sort of had animal gods and animals and part human, the Greeks created gods in their own image, and they had very human strengths and weaknesses. They didn't grovel before their gods, even though they needed to be venerated and sacrificed to, but they saw them as part and parcel of the human condition, if you like. Yeah. So mythos begins with chaos, which is the formless nothingness from which sprang the first order of divine beings. So there's a hierarchy of the first ones in the second tier and then the third tier, and a proliferation of gods and immortals through that process. So the first order of the divine was the creations of darkness and night and day and light. So and also Gaia, and that's a word that the historian
James
used.
Lovelock wrote about Gaia
is the earth, and then Tartarus, which was the depths underneath the earth. Now, Gaia bore 2 sons, Pontus, the sea, and Uranus, the sky. So you can see that they're trying to explain nature. Uranus and Gaia, went on to produce 12 children who became the second order of divine beings, or the Titans. Now, the Titans fought the gods at one point. So from 2 of these children, Kronos and Rhea, they had 6 children, which included Zeus, the king of the gods, and his queen of heaven, Hera. And so finally there were 12 Olympians, and it was the Olympians versus the Titans, and that's the stuff of much children writing for young children these days. Yeah, so they were Zeus, Hera, Hestia, Poseidon, Demeter, Aphrodite, Hephaestus, Ares, Athena, Artemis, Apollo, and Hermes. And we've all heard those names over and over again.
So would it be possible, I'm just thinking in terms of, when you're teaching, you do concept maps. And so you could actually do a diagram, couldn't you, where you've got all these outlined and how they're connected to each other, like family trees.
Yep, and Stephen Fry very handily does that for us at the front of the book.
Yep.
So you kind of can see what you're getting into and how active these guys were. So they were. So
you made a point that I was reading that, listening to you. It's kind of like whatever happened to our sort of classical education in New Zealand. I mean, it's kind of a Brit thing, that Fry would write something like this, and Johnson, the Prime Minister, is a classicist, and you hear him making references like this all the time.
Yes.
In fact, but for Kiwis, I think the only time we really get involved is when we're sitting there watching the chase, and there's a question come in amongst us, and we're astounded that the chasers have got this down pat. They seem to know everything.
Well, I admire them if they know everything, because there's a huge number of figures and relationships to get your head around in Greek mythology. And this first book, Mythos, covers the myths, but it doesn't include the Greek heroes like Jason of the Argonauts and so on and so forth. That's book 2, Heroes. Okay, so just and here's some more names that you will recognise when we think about the creation story. Now, every people has a way of explaining the creation of humans, and the Greeks did it like this. So Zeus just started to get a bit bored once he'd created, and the earth was formed and it was beautiful, and they were enjoying the fruits of their labours. These gods. He decided to create people for his perfect world, and he wanted people to be also perfect, but somewhat limited. He asked his great friend Prometheus to create a race of beings in his image, i.e. just men, and with intelligence and abilities, because Prometheus, his name means forethought or foresight. So Prometheus created a number of small figures in a range of colours using clay, spittle from Zeus, and fire, heat from the sun god Apollo. And these were brought to life by the breath of Athena, daughter of Zeus. So there are a number of gods that had a hand in making man. Zeus said, one thing about man is that you are not allowed, this is to Prometheus, you're not allowed to share knowledge of fire with man, for fear they would use it to challenge the gods. So man had to be kept in their place. However, over time, Prometheus decided that the people needed fire to maximise their capabilities, both in terms of their lives and their livelihoods, like smithing or cooking, but also their creativity, the fire of creativity. So he stole fire from Olympus and betrayed his greatest friend, Zeus, by doing that. In revenge, Zeus had his brother Hephaestus, who's the smithy, the sort of ugly, misshapen blacksmith, create woman. So the ultimate revenge of Zeus was the creation of woman. And he called her Pandora, and she was perfect in every respect. And he gifted her a jar and said, no matter what you do, my daughter, do not open this jar.
So why did he gift her a jar in the first place if she wasn't to open it?
Well,
she was designed to fail.
This is a test, you see. And Zeus sees all, knows all. He understands what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So Pandora becomes the wife of Epimetheus, who is Prometheus, the brother of Prometheus. Epimetheus means afterthought, if only I'd known. So great happiness follows until Pandora gives in to temptation one night and opens the jar, thus releases all the ills known to man: death, disease, poverty, crime, famine, war. So that they enter the world of man and women by this stage, and she can't shut the jar quickly enough to contain the baddies, but instead when she shuts the jar, hope is imprisoned behind. So after biding his time, Zeus is still wanting his ultimate revenge on Prometheus, and he does this by having him bound on a mountaintop and his heart eaten day by day by vultures. So that's a hell of a revenge. And Zeus calls it as he sees it. Yeah, but I love this book. It attempts to, he doesn't simplify a very complex range of characters. He has them all in, and you can see the relevance of the language, the names, and how these names
and
have
how
come
they're
down.
interconnected.
Yes,
that's what
and
gets
how they're
me.
connected. Yeah. And he also very helpfully gives you the Roman name as well, because quite often we get very confused about what were the Greeks and who were the Romans, and so he makes sense of all that.
So the Roman gods were superimposed on the Greeks.
Yes, they took
and so
Greek
the Roman
concept.
myths are really the Greek myths being retold in Roman terms.
Yeah, and probably amplified, but
and added to and
for sure.
But that brings up that whole thing about opening Pandora's box, doesn't it? You've got to think about how you use that term, because I have tried it once before and was told very clearly it wasn't the right analogy to be using in the situation.
Yeah, I think
and
people tend to think that it's a box of treasure.
Yeah.
But it's certainly not that in the original myth, and I'm sure Stephen Fry got it right.
Now, you were also saying about Stephen Fry, how he got into Greek myths, apart from the schooling. He apparently wasn't a great one for school. He lived in, I think he was brought up in Norfolk, where he still lives, and he was very dependent on the library, the mobile library. And through that, and through the gift of a book about myths and legends, which is something you often give small kids, he was hooked from day one. And there's also, through Auckland University, I've just remembered this, a website called something like Theon or some name like that he's very complimentary about, that is a summary of the Greek myths. Yeah, so, yeah.
He's quite the polymath, though, isn't he?
Yes.
We see him as
a Renaissance man, but a modern day one with so much more.
A celebrity, quizzy guy, a writer,
an actor.
An actor, he's done a lot of acting. He's a producer. He's directed
lived in New Zealand
movies.
For a while with the Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
I do remember a Stephen Fry thing which I thought was kind of interesting was there's an occasional column in the Times newspaper called Things I Do Not Do, and they ask celebrities what it is that they don't do. And Stephen Fry his column was, he says, the things I don't do sex. And he said he tried it as a young man and it didn't really work, so he never went back to it. And this was, quite an interesting column. I mean, that got people's attention for a start. And yeah, he just said that's something he doesn't do. So there you go.
He's been in prison though. He's done his time, Stephen. I can't remember what for. When he was quite young, drugs, I think.
Yeah, no, that's. So I think there are some autobiography types. There is a couple of memoirs that have come out and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Oh yes,
intriguing, fascinating, world figure really. And this book here shows another side to him, I guess.
Yep. So I really recommend it, and I'm also going to get hold of Heroes and read that as well.
So that's his next book.
Yes.
So Heroes would be dealing with
Jason and other Greek heroes.
and the Argonauts.
Yes.
And
Atalanta, the female, I can't remember what she did. But
you could see a senior student engaging with a book like this as a text, as against
a secondary student.
Yeah.
You mean? I think. Well, yes. I had a customer in over the weekend, and he comes in every now and again, and sometimes with his son, who's not very old. He's probably, I don't know, early teens, 12, 13. And I said, have you read Stephen Fry's Mythos? I asked him for reason that escapes me now, and he said yes, and I bought it for my son, who loved it. So a good reader. Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
Well, it just strikes me as way more accessible than perhaps a more classic textbook, which
we've all tried and not got very far with, really.
But the right writer.
Yeah, and I think the point about myths are fiction, and you're writing fiction, and you need to write in an engaging way. It's not a textbook. Yeah, I think that's important.
So
that's it from me.
That's
over and out
from Sue. We are going to miss you.
Well, I intend to keep in touch, and I will listen and watch from afar, and
that we will await some feedback. We can report the feedback if we like it.
Yeah, if we like it.
Yes.
So we'll just go through what we have been reading today. I reviewed Overstory by Richard. Oops, I haven't got this right. Richard Powers, which is around a sort of like an eco-warrior book about trees in the United States, and made me very thoughtful about eco-warriorism. And
in what way?
In what is achieved and what isn't achieved, and the despairing nature of people. The trees are taken down by people who've got great wealth anyway, and for a few more dollars in their bank account, and at a great loss to the planet. And so you need to have a bit of a backbone of iron or the trunk of a tree to read it and get through it.
And we also talked earlier about the track that everyone seems intent in this country upon doing, planting pines on farmland. Planting pines, it's a monoculture.
Monocultures are doomed. I think we need to have multicultural forests, just as we need to have multicultural society.
Here.
Okay, we looked at today Michael Connolly's The Night Fire. The Night Fire refers to the murder of a homeless man who was then burnt, and it's Harry Bosch's mantra through his books, everybody counts or nobody counts, and that's his raison d'etre for his detective work. Murder and Mayhem with Lee Charles and Jack Reacher in fine form. In the continuing saga, and we look forward to seeing the brothers.
That's going to be very interesting.
If if you really can just swap a character or swap a writer,
might be seamless.
And Robert Craye's A Dangerous Man, a terrific sort of rip-off of the movie Wanted.
And Sue, for your final contribution.
Yes, I think went out with a good bang, not a whimper. Stephen Fry's Mythos, much to be admired. The Times Literary Supplement calls it a cracking good story, and I'd endorse that. I'd agree with them.
So, before we finish, one last comment. We know anything more about the Wellington Library, Gareth? Have you heard any whispers?
Not at all. It's dropped off the radar.
Yes, I haven't read anything.
That may be a factor of a new mayor who just may not be all that interested. He seems to be way more tied up with Shelley Bay and the failing water system of the city.
Well, the failing water system of the city is something that he needs to be tied up with, I think.
And the sewage system.
I would prioritise the library top, and then after that everything else sort of follows after.
Well, thank you both, and I look forward to being with you all next month in March, and we'll see you, Gareth, and we will have an addition to our ranks.
Another, yes.
And another, yep. Which you will find out at the time.
Tune in.
Right. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye.